The nation Zimbabwe takes its name from the ancient kingdom of Great Zimbabwe, but what was the true purpose of these structures? Who built them and when? Welcome to Gemini Based TV, and in this video we're going to be exploring the origins of the ancient kingdom of Zimbabwe. If you're new to the channel, we'll publish new content regularly, so hit the subscribe button for more exciting videos. Since their discovery, these ruins have been shrouded in mystery and controversy. Over the years, various theories have emerged, some logical, others shocking. Current archaeological evidence points to the ancestors of the Shona people as the builders and inhabitants of Great Zimbabwe. However, this hasn't always been the accepted narrative, and even today, some challenge this conclusion. Early explorers and researchers proposed wild theories, some dismissed due to racial biases and lack of evidence, but could these forgotten ideas actually hold clues about the origins of this ancient site? In this video, we leave no stone unturned as we dive deep into the earliest records, controversial theories, and groundbreaking discoveries surrounding Great Zimbabwe. Great Zimbabwe is an ancient city located near Masvingo in central Zimbabwe, inhabited from around 1100 to 1550 CE and served as the heart of a powerful kingdom built on gold trade and commerce. It stands as the largest ancient stone structure in Africa south of Egypt. Constructed without mortar, its stone walls were precisely shaped to fit together, showcasing remarkable engineering skill. Building began in the 11th century and continued for nearly 300 years. Estimates of the population of Great Zimbabwe range from 10,000 to 20,000 people at its peak, and it spanned 1,779 acres. Unfortunately, much of the treasure and artifacts that could have provided vital clues about Great Zimbabwe's origins and purpose were looted before extensive research could be conducted during the 1890s colonial expeditions. This widespread looting has only deepened the mystery, making it even harder to uncover the full story of this lost civilization. The earliest recorded theories about Great Zimbabwe's origins come from Arab travelers who passed down their accounts to early Portuguese explorers. According to Hebrew texts, King Hiram of Tyre sent ships alongside King Solomon's fleet to the legendary land of Ophir, returning every 3 years with 450 talents of gold. King Solomon's wealth and wisdom became entwined with the story of the Queen of Sheba, believed to have ruled Saba, a kingdom central to ancient Arabian trade. Their relationship is believed to have given birth to the Solomonic lineage, which includes Ethiopian Emperor Haile Selassie, born Tafari Makonnen, who is central to the Abrahamic Rastafari religion. By the 1500s, Arab traders told Portuguese explorers that the ruins of Great Zimbabwe were once the Queen of Sheba's trading depots, a place where gold was stockpiled before being transported down the Zambezi River and onward to the Red Sea and Jerusalem. While biblical references hint at a large-scale gold mining operation, no definitive location for Ophir has ever been proven. Interestingly, Mount Darwin, where gold mines still exist today, was once marked as Mount Fura on old maps. This was said to be the center of the Munumutapa Kingdom's gold mines, leading some early researchers to speculate that it may have been linked to Ophir. While modern scholars often dismiss the Queen of Sheba and Solomon's connection to Great Zimbabwe, it's worth remembering that this theory did not originate from Europeans. It was first suggested by the Arabs themselves, those closest to these ancient traditions. The Portuguese, despite being well placed, apparently never actually reached Great Zimbabwe. Instead, only rumors of the mysterious stone city were passed down to the coast by Arab and Indian traders. The first documented description of Great Zimbabwe comes from Vicente Pegado, the Portuguese captain of the garrison at Sofala, modern-day Mozambique. Although he never visited the site, he recorded the descriptions he had in 1531. Among the gold mines of the inland plains between the Limpopo and Zambezi rivers, there is a fortress built of stones of marvelous size, and there appears to be no mortar joining them. This edifice is almost surrounded by hills, upon which are others resembling it in the fashioning of stone and the absence of mortar, and one of them is a tower more than 22 meters high. The natives of the country call these edifices Zimbabwe, which according to their language signifies court. In 1538, the Portuguese historian João de Barros recorded another description of Great Zimbabwe based on accounts from Moorish traders who had actually visited the area and had extensive knowledge of the African interior. According to these traders, the massive stone structures were called Zimbabwe. As to the actual identity of the builders of Great Zimbabwe, de Barros writes, when and by whom these edifices were raised, as the people of the land are ignorant of the art of writing, there is no record, but they say they are the work of the devil, for in comparison with their power and knowledge, it does not seem possible to them that they should be the work of men. However, the word devil did not exist in the Karanga vocabulary at the time. Other writers suggested a mistranslation and insisted that what the locals likely meant was that the ruins were the work of Ngwari or ancestral spirits. Additionally, the Shona people have historically been known to withhold sacred tribal knowledge from outsiders, especially foreign traders and colonialists. To this day, no inscriptions or writing has ever been found at any ruin throughout southern Africa. Yet in 1552, de Barros described the kingdom of Sofala, its gold mines, its ruler Monomotapa, and the fortress in the center of the mining country. Above the door of this building is an inscription which some Moorish traders, landmen who went there, did not know how to read, nor could they tell in what character it is written. This statement is intriguing as these traders were highly educated and well versed in the languages of the Indian Ocean trade routes, yet they could not identify the script. Portuguese missionary João dos Santos, who lived and worked in the Sofala region, recorded a similar tradition in 1609. He added that some old Moors claimed the ruins at the top of the mountains had once been trading depots for the legendary Queen of Sheba, where vast amounts of gold were brought to her. According to Dos Santos, further inland the land belonged to the Monomotapa, the ruler of a powerful kingdom. Dos Santos also observed that the Monomotapa and his people had a strong resemblance to the Abyssinians or modern-day Ethiopians. He referred to these people as the Mukarangas. Adam Renders, a German-American hunter, prospector, and trader, is widely credited as the first European to lay eyes on the medieval city of Great Zimbabwe. He stumbled upon the ruins in 1867 after losing his way while hunting big game. Despite the significance of his discovery, Renders made little effort to publicize it to the Western world. Instead, he continued exploring the region informally, uncovering several ancient gold mines along the way. Known to the local people as Sir Adama, he was well regarded, maintaining good relations with them and always paying for what he needed. Interestingly, Adam Renders never left Great Zimbabwe. He chose to stay, marrying the daughter of a local chief and spending the rest of his life in the area. Today, the surname Renders can still be found among some families in Mafingo, suggesting he may have left behind descendants. In 1871, Adam Renders hosted the German explorer and geographer Karl Mauch, who had heard of Great Zimbabwe and came to the area hoping to make the first archaeological study. Mauch stayed with Renders for 9 months, conducting detailed studies of the site. Unlike Renders, who remained relatively quiet about the ruins, Mauch sent sensational reports to the overseas press. He claimed that Great Zimbabwe was a replica of Solomon's temple and that he had found the biblical land of Ophir, famous for its gold. As the first Westerner to report on Great Zimbabwe, it was Mauch who received most credit for its discovery. Mauch also recorded that the Barori people gathered every 2 to 4 years at the foot of the Great Zimbabwe Hill after their harvest to celebrate a grand feast and sacrifice to Mwari, using their ancestors as intermediaries. He saw parallels between these rituals and ancient Israelitic traditions, reinforcing his belief that the ruins were linked to biblical history. The similarities of these sacrifices to those ordained in the Israelitic cult is unmistakable. Relying on this, I believe I do not err when I suppose that the ruin on the mountain is an imitation of the Solomonic temple on Mount Moriah, the ruin on the plain, a copy of that palace in which the Queen of Sheba dwelled during her visit to Solomon. Following Karl Mauch's visit, Willy Posselt, a German explorer, arrived at Great Zimbabwe in 1888. Posselt bribed the brother of Chief Mugabe, the custodian of the ruins at the time, and took one of Great Zimbabwe's sacred bird carvings, which held deep spiritual significance for the Shona people. Posselt sold the bird to Cecil Rhodes, who went on to fund expeditions to the ruins for other colonial explorers. Posselt recorded that when he first caught sight of Great Zimbabwe, his local carriers belonging to a nearby tribe sat down and solemnly saluted the sight by clapping their hands. He also documented oral accounts from the locals who told him that in earlier times the Barori had occupied the ruins and offered sacrifices there at intervals. By 1891, the ruins of Great Zimbabwe had fallen under the control of the British South Africa Company, the colonial administration that later became Southern Rhodesia and eventually Rhodesia, named after its founder Cecil Rhodes. British archaeologist Theodore Bent was placed in charge of the site. He interpreted Great Zimbabwe through a religious lens, believing the structures reflected ancient phallic worship from pre-Islamic Arabia and Phoenicia. He compared the conical tower to a phallic symbol on a coin from Byblos, Phoenicia, where a sacred cone stood with a temple enclosure. Bent was convinced that the same civilization that built the Temple of Awam in Yemen, commonly referred to as the sanctuary of the Queen of Sheba, was responsible for Great Zimbabwe. He also linked Sardinian Nuragi to the same phallic worship tradition. He speculated that the hill complex contained temples, while his surveyor theorized that the great enclosure functioned as an astronomical observatory for measuring the tropical year. Bent's conclusions reinforced Karl Mauch's earlier claims that Great Zimbabwe had ties to King Solomon and the Queen of Sheba. He noted that the local population from the Sabi River to Fort Chata called themselves Makalanga, echoing Portuguese missionary João dos Santos' earlier accounts. Bent even suggested renaming the region Makarangaland. In 1896, he further speculated that the male ancestry of the ancient Zimbabweans traced back to the Sabians of southern Arabia, also likening them to figures in Egyptian tombs. He was convinced that a Semitic influence was present in their customs and religious practices. Interestingly, he pointed out that the Save River, an ancient gold trade route, was historically known as the Sabi River, possibly linking it to Sheba, also known as Saba. Bent also observed the musical traditions of the Makaranga, noting that one of his local workers played a thumb piano, the mpira, almost constantly. Richard Hall, an English lawyer and journalist, was the next major investigator of Great Zimbabwe. He conducted the first detailed survey of the great enclosure, compiling and publishing plans of all the valley ruins and several other archaeological sites across Zimbabwe. Hall reinforced that the Sabian Arabian culture home to the Queen of Sheba, was the most likely origin of Great Zimbabwe civilization. He suggested that the Sabi or Save River may have been named after Sabian merchants who visited the region. He also noted that the great enclosure, often referred to as the elliptical temple, was almost identical to the Queen of Sheba's temple of Awam. Hall emphasized that the Sabians obtained great wealth through gold trade rather than mining. He recorded that the Makaranga people were also referred to as the children of the sun, although European settlers commonly referred to them as Mashona. Like Theodore Bent and Father Dos Santos before him, Hall argued that the region should be named Makaranga land instead of Mashona land. He also identified several Semitic customs among the local population, particularly the use of totems, which remains a key aspect of Shona culture today. Hall noted that the totem system was prevalent among early Semitic groups before biblical times and later appeared in Hebrew traditions such as the Lion of Judah. Hall documented a ritual sacrifice that took place at Great Zimbabwe in February 1904. The ceremony occurred within the elliptical temple, but it was kept secret until after the arrival of rain. He recorded that the Makaranga people traveled from distant regions to perform sacrifices within the temple walls, offering their tributes at different spots inside the enclosure. Karl Peters was a German explorer and colonial administrator. In 1905, he traveled through the region between the Zambezi and Save rivers, where he collected and excavated ceramic Ushabti figurine. An Ushabti is a small human-shaped figurine that was buried with ancient Egyptians to save the deceased in the afterlife. The discovery suggested possible Egyptian connections. However, the question remained, who would have transported such an object to Zimbabwe? Flinders Petrie, a renowned English Egyptologist, examined the artifact and identified a cartouche on its chest belonging to the 5th pharaoh of the 18th dynasty of Egypt, Thutmose III. He concluded that it was a statue of the king and cited it as evidence of commercial ties between rulers in the region and ancient Egypt, possibly even a relic of an Egyptian trading post near local gold mines. This finding reinforced Peter's belief that Great Zimbabwe was the source of gold for Solomon's temple. It was further suggested that Egyptian influence could explain the resemblance between the Zimbabwe bird and the Egyptian god Horus. Another potential Egyptian link noted by historians is the wooden headdress used by the inhabitants of Great Zimbabwe, which closely resembles those used by the ancient Egyptians. The first scientific archaeological excavations at Great Zimbabwe were conducted by David Randall McClever on behalf of the British Association in 1905. Unlike earlier explorers such as Karl Peters and Karl Mauch, Randall McClever dismissed theories that attributed the ruins to foreign builders. Instead, he concluded that the site was medieval in age and constructed by the ancestors of the Shona people. He observed that many artifacts closely resembled objects still in use by the Shona, reinforcing the idea of local authorship. Based on his findings, he estimated that Great Zimbabwe was built between AD 1000 and 1500 with no evidence of influence from foreign civilizations. However, his conclusions faced resistance. His excavation was brief and lacked sufficient manpower, making it easier for critics to dismiss his findings. And so, a discovery that should have solved the mystery of Great Zimbabwe instead ignited further controversy, intensifying the debate over the site's origins. Over the next 2 decades, significant work was done to survey, examine, and even reconstruct the ruins of Great Zimbabwe. However, no new theories emerged until 1929 when archaeologist Gertrude Thompson arrived to conduct what would become a groundbreaking investigation. A student of Flinders Petrie and an expert in modern archaeological techniques, Gertrude Thompson introduced stratigraphy, a method that analyzes soil layers and artifacts to determine a site's historical timeline. However, she faced a significant challenge. Much of the evidence had already been destroyed by earlier excavations, making it difficult to reconstruct the site's true history. Working alongside an all-female team of archaeologists, Gertrude Thompson carried out a 12-day excavation, digging several trenches across the site. What she found infuriated the colonial authorities. The evidence was undeniable. African habitation was present in every single layer of the site. Her conclusion was clear. Great Zimbabwe was built by a Bantu-speaking people, not by some lost civilization of foreign origin. She suggested that the builders may have belonged to an ascendant but now disintegrated tribal unit, possibly linked to Barori and Bavenda. Though her findings were groundbreaking, they were not immediately accepted, particularly by those still clinging to the belief that Great Zimbabwe was the work of non-Africans. However, by 1931, she refined her theory slightly, acknowledging that while the ruins were undeniably African, there could have been some Arabian influence, not in construction but in inspiration. She speculated that Great Zimbabwe's architecture may have been imitative, perhaps influenced by an African traveler who had seen structures along the East African coast and recreated certain elements back home. One notable comparison was made to the Malindi Mosque in Tanzania, which features not only a cone-shaped minaret similar to the conical tower of Great Zimbabwe, but also the chevron pattern on the great enclosure. Yet, despite these minor acknowledgements for external influence, Gertrude Thompson's ultimate verdict stood firm. Great Zimbabwe was the work of an African civilization. In 1958, archaeologist Keith Robinson introduced a game-changing scientific method to the study of Great Zimbabwe: radiocarbon dating. During an excavation, Robinson discovered wooden poles buried within the ruins. His tests revealed that the wood came from a tree cut down sometime between 915 and 1215 CE. This provided tangible scientific proof that Great Zimbabwe was built in medieval times, confirming what Gertrude Thompson had suggested 3 decades earlier. In the years that followed, other scholars conducted additional radiocarbon tests, cross-checking Robinson's findings with new samples from different parts of the site. Their conclusion was that most of the stone structures at Great Zimbabwe were inhabited between 1300 and 1450 CE, marking the peak of this African civilization. Meanwhile, the government of Ian Smith, Prime Minister of Southern Rhodesia until 1979, continued the colonial glorification of Great Zimbabwe's origins. Official guidebooks depicted Africans bowing down to foreign builders, reinforcing the false narrative that Great Zimbabwe was beyond the capabilities of its indigenous people. The Rhodesian government actively suppressed archaeological research that pointed to African authorship. Archaeologists were pressured to deny evidence that Great Zimbabwe was built by the ancestors of the Shona people, and any publications contradicting the colonial version of history faced censorship. This suppression led to the forced departure of prominent archaeologists, including Peter Garlick, Senior Inspector of Monuments for Rhodesia, and Roger Summers of the National Museum. Garlick had spent years studying the ruins and was one of the first to comprehensively challenge colonial myths with detailed architectural and historical analysis. Garlick emphasized that it was gold that drew foreign traders to Zimbabwe for nearly 1,000 years. Arab, Swahili, and Portuguese merchants brought beads, textiles, ceramics, and glassware to exchange for gold and ivory, which were abundant in the region. However, while trade flourished, its impact on the local economy was minimal. At best, it provided luxury goods for the elite. At worst, it laid the foundation for exploitation, a cycle that has persisted to this day. However, the plot only thickens. The construction of Great Zimbabwe is also claimed by the Lemba people, an ethnic group in Zimbabwe and South Africa with a tradition of ancient Jewish or South Arabian descent through their male lineage. For hundreds of years, this claim was dismissed until the early 2000s when DNA tests finally confirmed what they had always known. They are the Black Jews of Africa. The Lemba believe they are descended from an ancient group of Jews led out of Israel by a prophet named Buba. The Lemba claim to have passed through Sena where they built a city. Most Lemba people consider themselves Israelites or children of Abraham, believing they once lived in Yemen before migrating to Africa alongside Arabian and other traders, eventually settling in southern Africa. The Buba clan, whose name some believe evolved from Judah, was traditionally responsible for conducting secret sacrifices. They were regarded as priests among the Lemba clans. Another notable lineage within the Lemba is the Towakare, famous for their stone masonry. The Towakare men were called Makudu e Zimbabwe, meaning they climbed the walls like baboons while constructing Zimbabwe. Ironically, in 2015, the Lemba Jews who still live in Mapakomere, just 20 miles from Great Zimbabwe, built their first synagogue. Notable Lemba descendants include one of Zimbabwe's best-selling gospel artists Fungisai and controversial EFF leader Julius Malema. So where does this leave the earlier theories that were dismissed due to lack of evidence? Archaeological timelines suggest that by the time Great Zimbabwe was built, the Lemba had already intermixed with local Bantu tribes for hundreds of years. This means that while they may have contributed to Great Zimbabwe's construction, the evidence still overwhelmingly points to indigenous African builders. But rather than solving the mystery, this revelation only raises more questions. And so the mystery continues. As always, thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe and stay tuned.